Alexander Hart lay motionless on the leather couch in his home office, his breathing carefully regulated, eyes closed but senses alert. The late afternoon sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden bars across the Persian rug worth more than most people's cars. His tablet rested on his chest, still displaying the spreadsheet he'd been reviewing before he'd heard the soft knock and decided, on impulse, on instinct, on some gut feeling he couldn't name, to pretend sleep. The door creaked open. Footsteps barely audible. The new maid, he assumed. Elena, or was it Elisa? He'd hired her 3 weeks ago through the agency, signing off on the paperwork his assistant had prepared without really looking at her, without really seeing her. Just another face in the endless rotation of staff that kept his mansion running, while he focused on the empire that had consumed his entire adult life. At 38, Alexander Hart had everything success was supposed to bring. CEO of Hart Industries, penthouse in Manhattan, this estate in Connecticut, cars he rarely drove, art he never looked at, a calendar so packed with meetings and acquisitions that he sometimes forgot to eat, and a loneliness so profound it had become background noise, constant, numbing, easy to ignore until 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and the silence in his bedroom felt like drowning. The footsteps stopped. He could sense her standing there, probably looking at him, probably wondering if she should wake him or leave him. Alexander kept his breathing even, wondering himself why he was doing this. Testing her? For what? Honesty? Integrity? He'd spent 15 years in business learning that everyone had a price. Everyone had an angle. Why should this shy maid be any different? Through barely parted lashes, he watched her move. She was small, maybe 5'3", with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore the standard uniform, simple gray dress, white apron. But something about the way she carried herself spoke of exhaustion that went bone deep. Her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to take up less space in the world. Elena, he suddenly remembered her name was Elena Garcia, approached the desk, not him. She began organizing the papers he'd scattered during his afternoon of frustrated work calls. Her movements were careful, methodical. She wasn't snooping through confidential documents or pocketing the gold pen he'd carelessly left on the edge. She was simply tidying. Then she did something that made Alexander's carefully controlled breathing almost falter. She noticed his coffee cup. Cold, half empty, lipstick stained from this morning when he'd been too distracted to notice he'd grabbed his ex-wife's old mug from the back of the cabinet. Elena picked it up and Alexander watched her face shift. Her eyes welled with tears. What the hell? Elena held the cup like it was something precious, her fingers trembling. She looked at Alexander, still sleeping on the couch, and her expression crumbled into something so deeply sad it made his chest tighten. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to him, though she clearly thought he couldn't hear. "I'm so sorry you're alone like this." Alexander's mind reeled. What was she talking about? Elena carried the cup to the small sink in his office bar, washing it with gentle care. But she was crying now, soft tears rolling down her cheeks as she dried the mug and placed it back in the cabinet, not in front where he'd found it, but in the back hidden away. "You don't need reminders of her," Elena said quietly, still thinking he was asleep. "Whoever hurt you, whoever left, you don't need to keep punishing yourself by looking at her things." Alexander felt like he'd been punched. He hadn't even realized he'd been using Catherine's mug. Hadn't consciously chosen it, but Elena had noticed. Elena had understood something about his pain that he'd been hiding even from himself. She returned to the desk, and that's when Alexander saw what she did next. From her apron pocket, Elena pulled out a small battered notebook. She wrote something quickly, tore out the page and placed it carefully on his desk where he'd see it. Then she pulled out something else, a granola bar slightly squashed, and set it beside the note. "Please eat something, Mr. Hart," she whispered. "You work so hard. You deserve to take care of yourself." Alexander's throat tightened. When was the last time someone had genuinely worried about whether he'd eaten? His assistant scheduled meals like meetings, but no one actually cared if the food made it past his lips. Elena moved to leave, then hesitated. She walked to the couch where Alexander lay, and for a heart-stopping moment he thought she'd discovered his deception. Instead, she reached for the throw blanket draped over the nearby chair, an old, worn thing his grandmother had made, the only item in this showcase house that held real sentimental value. Carefully, Tenderly, Elena spread the blanket over him. Her movements were so gentle, so maternal, that Alexander felt something crack inside his chest. She adjusted it around his shoulders, making sure he was covered, and her hand, for just a second, hovered above his head as if she wanted to smooth his hair but didn't dare. "Rest well," she breathed. "You look so tired. I hope you find peace, whatever you're running from." Then she was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind her. Alexander lay there for a full minute, unable to move. His eyes burned. His throat ached. Slowly he sat up, the blanket falling to his lap. He reached for the note Elena had left. The handwriting was simple, unpracticed. "Mr. Hart, I noticed you haven't eaten today. The kitchen staff said you missed breakfast and lunch. Please take care of yourself. The world needs good people like you to stay strong." Elena, good people. She thought he was good? She didn't know him at all. Didn't know about the hostile takeovers, the companies he'd dismantled, the ruthless reputation that made competitors pale. But she'd seen his grandmother's blanket and understood it meant something. She'd seen his ex-wife's coffee mug and understood he was hurting. She'd seen him sleeping in the middle of a workday and understood he was exhausted. She'd seen him. Really seen him. Not the CEO or the billionaire or the cold businessman everyone else saw. She'd seen a lonely, tired man who needed someone to care if he ate. Alexander unwrapped the granola bar with shaking hands. It was generic store brand, probably from Elena's own lunch. She'd given him her food. This woman who probably made minimum wage had given him, a man who could buy a restaurant on a whim, her own sustenance because she was worried about him. He took a bite. It tasted like sawdust, but he chewed anyway, tears finally spilling over. For the first time in 15 years, Alexander Hart cried. Not from anger or frustration or stress, but from the overwhelming realization that he'd been testing the wrong person. Elena hadn't failed his test. He had failed hers, failed at basic humanity, failed at seeing the people who served him as actual human beings, failed at recognizing that wealth and power meant nothing without kindness. Alexander finished the granola bar, folded Elena's note carefully, and placed it in his wallet where he kept only the most important things. Then he picked up his phone and made a call that would change everything. "Jenkins? Yes, it's Hart. I need you to pull Elena Garcia's file. Full background, but not for vetting. I want to know what she needs. Medical bills, debts, family situation. Find out and report back to me within the hour." He ended the call and looked around his office. Really looked at it for the first time. All this luxury, and he'd needed a shy maid making minimum wage to teach him what it meant to be human. Tomorrow, things would change. But tonight, wrapped in his grandmother's blanket, Alexander Hart fell into the first peaceful sleep he'd had in years, warmed by the knowledge that genuine kindness still existed in the world, and that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to deserve it.